The mellifluous tones of which theme tune can only mean it's time for another teissTalk here on Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. Hello to all of you. My name's Jeff White. I'm the host of Thursday's teissTalk here every Thursday at 4. My co-host Jenny Radcliffe does the Tuesday sessions. For those of you what don't know, she's on at 4, and you are live here at teissTalk. All of our talks are archived on the Teiss website, so you can catch up with them and go back to our archives. But why would you bother doing that? You're here live and live with us. It is your chat very much. We have got all of our attendees in the chat window. We want to hear from you, on your questions, your comments, your bad jokes. We also have our Teiss Goblin, you'll notice, who runs things from afar, scribbling away behind the scenes to make sure everything goes well. And Teiss Hunter, who is normally the Tuesday person who helps out Jenny. Presumably we've got double help needed for me to get on with today. But hello to all of you. Do drop us a line in the chat and say hello. We've also got the Q&A panel where you can ask myself and our guests questions, and that is all yours. So it's great to have you with us all. We are going to get started in a sec, just as soon as I was shutting something down and I was a bit worried it has actually shut down. That's fine. What I shut down was actually the research folder for my book that I'm researching, and that's very, very tense moment when you save the folder. If it doesn't save, maybe you've lost all of your work. Very tense, but that's all good now. Hello to all of you watching. We're going to be getting started very, very soon now. Malicious or non-malicious, tackling the remote insider threat, which is interesting. Already that title presents us with a bit of a conundrum, doesn't it? Because it's remote insider threat. So insider threat in the past meant that they were in your building, potentially in your premises, whereas now you've got the remote insider threat, which is kind of remote but kind of insider. So it's interesting. I think we can play around with that one in the session today. Before we get started, though, we were discussing the Teiss Goblin and I before as to whether we've switched the heating on yet. I, clearly being a soft southerner, have. Teiss Goblin has not. And so we did wonder whether, already getting crap about mentioning my book. Yes, I do. I mention it every time. Honestly, when you start writing a book, you will also mention it all the time. It's kind of what you do. But we were talking about whether you switch the heating on. And I wondered whether we could ask our Teiss audience a simple poll, which is, have you switched the heating on yet? Yes or no? And this poll will appear up on the top right-hand side of your screen where it says polls. You'll be able to vote in the Teiss poll, which is clearly what we want to know. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to go in there and vote. Have you switched your heating on? It is the 29th of September. I think that's entirely fair to turn I think, to be honest, when the August bank holiday comes, it's time for the heating to go on. But I can be proved wrong. And I'm interested to see whether I am the soft southerner in the group. So do get in the poll. Let us know whether you switch your heating on or off, and we'll get the results of that in a sec. I am looking at our guests for later on. We're going to be hearing in a bit from Neil King, who's European Business and Information Security Specialist at Canon Europe, and Robin Lennon-Bilenga, who's Human Factors and Performance at Lead Scout B. And we've got our main guest to come. But before we introduce him, the results of our poll are fairly conclusive. In fact, I don't think we've had a poll that's been that conclusive ever on a teissTalk that I've done, and that makes me feel really, really profligate because you can't see from the waist down. It's just swim shorts. Honestly, I'm roasting here. There's, it's tropical in this. No, it's not. It's cold. How have you not got your heating on? I can't believe you haven't switched the heating on. Okay, all right, well, fair enough. Paul Barnes says, what heating? JJ Davis says, hello, it's still summer for gingers or gingers, depending how you pronounce it. Simon is sitting around a candle. Benjamin saying, isn't the government paying for our heating this year? Interesting, for those of you who've heard our Prime Minister Liz Truss on the radio this morning. But look, let's push on without further ado. We've got our first guest on the topic today, who's Hans-Peter Bauer. He's Senior Vice President EMEA of Cybersecurity at BlackBerry. And Hans-Peter is joining us. If you take yourself off mute, you can tell us how you're doing today. Oh, you're still on mute, unfortunately, Hans-Peter.
Here as well, close to minus, so I would be a 1% in the voting because I put the heater on today. So we had almost snow last night, so good that we still have electricity. Jeff? Jeff, can't hear you.
Peter, can you hear me?
Now I hear you. So I don't know. Was I away? I mean, I use the office
No.
network. I hope the band was good enough. So
It was me. I had that embarrassing moment where I thought you'd frozen, so I kept talking to fill in, and then realised I was frozen, and realised you were probably talking. So anyway, we are back now. And you were saying it's cold enough in Germany to justify switching on your heating.
Pardon?
It's cold enough that you've gone for the heating. You've switched back on the heating.
It's pretty. I think it's around 5 degrees. I live in the area of Munich, which is close to the Alps. So, and we had almost snow yesterday night, the first snow here.
Okay.
So, I think it's a good reason to have the heat on. So
yes, you are very much justified in that, Hans Peter. By the way, BlackBerry, can you talk us through? Is the BlackBerry security function based in Germany, or are you the sort of security functions in each area? Tell us how the BlackBerry security situation is set up in the company.
So we are global. I think, as all kind of, we are virtual organizations. So, and the hub for EMEA is basically Munich because I'm living there. So no, we have London office, with Paris office. So we are spread around the world. I think security, you have to be, especially if you do research, because security has a lot to do with understanding the culture, understanding the language of the different countries. And so we are really global prepared to defend ourselves against any threat. And you see more and more threats are very targeted. So social engineering, language, and all this kind of cultural things play a real role in attacking organizations as well as people. So that's why I think cybersecurity is really global, and if you work in that space, you have to be global as well.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one for BlackBerry as well, because obviously one of BlackBerry's big selling points has always been, the security of the servers, the fact that the company owned, back when phones was its big thing, that was a big aspect. Has that been useful in terms of repositioning BlackBerry, in its new incarnation, if you like, the fact that the company's got a long security history, a long data security history?
I think the brand BlackBerry, BlackBerry was basically the first cloud service in the market. I mean, if you look at cloud, BlackBerry stand always for reliability, for data privacy, and for data security. So this helps a lot in order to address a broader security landscape than in the past, because cybersecurity goes so broad. If you look at all the different devices, all the different services today, so I think BlackBerry was well prepared to move from pure mobile service and data privacy purpose into a real security company to help basically to support all aspects of cybersecurity.
Interesting stuff. Thanks to Hans Peter. Let's push on. We're going to, before we get started on the main panel thing, we're going to be talking about a news article which you spotted. This is in infosecurity-magazine.com. The august James Coker has written this, preventing the recruitment of insider threat actors. And I'll be honest with you, Hans Peter, when I first read this article, I was a little worried about quite how rigorous it would be, because the first paragraph, it says here, according to James, there's a growing trend where threat actors are exploiting existing employees for their knowledge and access to an organization's data. These employees are commonly known as insider threats. And I thought that was a very, very basic level to start out. The article does go on and make some interesting points. Was there something that jumped out from this for you, Hans Peter?
Yeah, I think that's. For me, it has two aspects. The one is intentional, and the one is unintentional. I think with more and more work from home and usage from home, it becomes much easier for the attackers to address employees, and that's why I mentioned social engineering. One is to take over a device and appear basically as an insider. The other one is to steal the credentials of an employee and be basically act as the employee. So, and I think if you look about that, it's had a lot to do with much more online time of employees in their work from home situation. And if you look at COVID taught us that work from home is much more possible than in the past. I mean, we got basically in all over Europe a 70 to 80% increase of work from home time. So remote work from your home office is totally implemented now in the most of the companies. But, and there is the but, is the infrastructure of the company as well as the infrastructure of the employee prepared for those kind of communication? You know? I think there is the big difference. It's online time. You know, think about your own network at home. I think I just got a recent study where in the UK, smart meters, smart thermostats connected by network were deployed at 15 million households in the UK. Or in Germany, there is a promise if you use smart home and smart meters, you get 20% saving on energy costs. Yes. So, but those networks, those connections, those devices make it much more complex to secure the environment. So those devices, I mean, it's all IoT devices. They were never prepared to work or to support a secure environment. And that's where the problem comes from. So it's much easier for the hackers, for the attackers from outside to connect longer to your device. And this gives them much more opportunity to hack your device or communicate with you in order to get something out of you.
Indeed. It's interesting because obviously that's somebody's domestic home device, their webcam or whatever device they bought and they've plugged in at home. And obviously you, BlackBerry, for example, are the employer. To what extent, using BlackBerry as an example, to what extent is BlackBerry able to ask its employees, well, can you tell us what equipment you're using at home, or can we audit the equipment you're using at home? Is that possible to do for BlackBerry employees?
Yes, I think there is a lot of new approaches possible to secure your basically your home as well. And I think, you know, there is a lot of access methodologies in order to analyze, even if it's you appear like an employee, to see you if you have an unusual behavior, you know, in a certain way. I give you an example. Why should a receptionist have access to your account data, to your account numbers, to your credentials within your bank account? Usually not. So, and if we use artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to analyze those kind of behaviors, and then we alert for sure. So, but at the end of the day, it comes back to one decision in security, as you all know, good or bad, because it's if you take something good, if you block something good, that's not good for the company as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I mean, what I was asking about was, you know, for BlackBerry employees who are working at home, to what extent can BlackBerry, the company, say to its employees, can you please tell us what router you're using or what webcams you have? Can you get to that level, do you think?
Okay. So we have a corporate setup for our devices. And we use BlackBerry technology, and you see that's an iPhone. It's not a BlackBerry device, but there is an app on it basically which makes this iPhone a BlackBerry device. It's totally divided and isolated two environments on my home device, and you can apply that to an iPad. You can apply that to a whatever iPhone or Android phone or whatever. So I think we were prepared to really kind of work from home environment. And again, it goes back to the history, as I said. We provided very reliable mobile access, mobile communication to the market. So it's just the development of our former technology, providing hardware devices as known as BlackBerry, and I know that a lot of people did like it. So now we moved into more software kind of devices. So it's a container. It's a container-based software solution on iPhones, on Macs, on other devices.
So that's so the use of that technology, the fact that your staff and yourself, you're using BlackBerry software to secure whatever device you're on, does that mean that you don't have to have those conversations with people about remote working? Because if they're at home but they're using the BlackBerry software on their tablet or phone or whatever at home, they'll be okay. Is that the idea?
I think, Jeff, technology can help you in a 99% case to be secure. But there is a human aspect as well. If people are angry about the company, if people are grudge about the company, if that's what I mentioned by intentionally. There's always a problem if people really want to do something malicious.
Yes, yeah.
That's much more difficult, let's say, to detect and to block and to solve as the other one, the technology-based one.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's bring in our other panelists now, who've been waiting patiently in the wings for us to introduce them. Neil King is European Business and Information Security Specialist at Canon Europe, and Robin Lennon-Bailenga is Human Factors and Performance at Lead Scout B. Hello to both of you. Robin, can I come to you first of all? Did you have a look at this piece in InfoSec magazine, and I wonder what you picked out from it?
Yes, I did, and I was interested that they brought in romance scams in it, but also
you should. I think you might need to explain that. In what way did they bring in romance scams to this?
They were actually. I was bringing up the article so I could actually note it, but they were talking about how employees are targeted.
Oh yes,
and one of the paragraphs down, it says, employees can be emotionally blackmailed into playing the part by being hoodwinked into believing that they're in a romance relationship, and that's that's a huge problem. And honestly, I'm in a group in the UK to work with the Met Police on romance scams, but until I read that article, I didn't even think about how it meshed with this conversation. So that's another really good point that people could target you through dating app.
It was interesting. Yeah, I remember now in the article that they talked about that, and they talked about the fact that through romance scamming, somebody might end up with some compromising material which could be used to blackmail you into doing something in the company. I mean, that strikes me, Robin, as quite up close and personal, literally up close and personal, but it's quite an individualized. It doesn't strike me as a tactic you could do as a blanket tactic. It's quite difficult to scale, but on an individual level could work quite well if you wanted into one particular company.
Yeah, it was a different angle that I hadn't really considered. So, but when you're looking at more large scale tactics, and some of the people this article did talk about, people that are in financially challenging situations. I was talking to one of my friends that's a consultant, and he was dealing with a client, financial client in Africa, which is a nation there where a £20,000 is a year's salary for a threat actor. That's a drop in the bucket, so to speak, and offer someone, $20,000 to go and give the credentials. And, if somebody's really hurting financially, that can be a very, very hard thing to say no to, and takes a lot of integrity.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for that, Robin. Neil, can I come to you again? In this particular article, there was quite a lot in it. I don't know whether you picked out something in particular or something stood out to you from this piece.
Well, one of the things that I really sort of picked out about with this is that whole remote bit, and the point is that it then becomes very difficult to ask for help.
Yeah.
If you're in the office and whatever, and something doesn't seem right, you can always turn around to one of your colleagues and go, "Does this seem right to you?" And when you're at home, it's more difficult to do that, to have that communication with your team. And also from previous experience, that sort of sits in this in terms of the distance thing as well now, so more for the malicious actor than the accidental actor. There were signs there. So in a previous existence, we worked very closely with a call center. And one of the areas that you would look at if there was, in this particular case, credit cards, was distance travel to the office. If someone was traveling 60 or 70 miles a day to go to a call center role, what was the reasoning behind that? It may be but it was always suspicious in terms of why would you travel 70 miles a day to work in that type role?
Right.
Well, now that the distance factor is gone, it's harder for people to spot, to even ask those questions in terms of HR who become aware of factors that they may have looked at previously. People can no longer look at all of those factors because actually people are working remotely.
So if somebody was traveling really, really far to get to a call center job, that might be a suspicious flag, because why would you do that? Perhaps you're traveling 60 or 70 miles because you're only taking the call center job because you want to get the data out. Was that the idea?
Yeah, and that's happening in terms of in particular, it used to be in the past for credit card numbers. If you were in a more relaxed call center or whatever, it was easier. So people would be prepared to travel the distance to do the piece. And also taking on to Robin's piece, I was also aware that used to happen with call center staff, particularly holiday trips and those sort of bits and pieces, coming back and people saying, "Oh, I will send these photographs to your manager." We know that happened. We had members of staff report it.
Right. It's fascinating, isn't it? Hans-Peter, I just wanted to come to you on this, because when we were chatting yesterday in preparation for this session, we talked about the fact that some of this stuff gets into employee privacy and employee monitoring their behavior, monitoring their patterns of behavior, potentially monitoring data. And I just wanted to talk to you, Hans-Peter, about that, because obviously in Germany it's slightly different to the UK. I wondered if you could give us the German perspective on what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do in terms of keeping an eye on staff.
I think it's in the most of the European countries, it's difficult to really to monitor behavior because of the different labor laws. I think some are more easy, some are more kind of tough, like the German one. But you have to speak about the German situation. I mean, in Germany there is a lot allowed, but you have to agree with the Workers' Council in order to monitor data, and it's not allowed, for example, and that's something we as companies, we have to work on to neutralize data. So you see a behavior, but you don't see the person there directly.
Right.
So, and that's maybe subject to check for the HR department or so, or to totally neutralize data and just see if there are threats, and then you have to remediate it and so on.
Sorry, Hans-Peter, I was going to ask, the Workers' Councils, that's not something, what is that? What's that?
The Workers' Council is the community of the workers. By law in Germany, if a company, if an organization has more than a couple hundred people, then by law they have to have a Workers' Council. And basically every tool, whatever you use in your organization or in your company, has to agree basically with the Workers' Council, and they try to make sure that it can't be used for personal measures, for rating, for kind of a assessment of employees or so on. That's not allowed in Germany, but it's allowed to use those kind of tools to avoid crime or to avoid damage to the company. Right. So that's what you have to explain, and I think technology is able to do that today. So it sounds more difficult than it really is.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I want to go to you, Robin, on this point in terms of actually being able to analyze this kind of behavior. There is a sort of slight ethical, philosophical point involved in this. How deep can you go? How deep do you want to get into people's behavior and so on? I mean, in that article in InfoSecurity magazine, they talked about the fact that if an employee is going through a tough time personally, they may be more willing to be compromised by somebody else. They may be more willing to attack the company. But to find that out, you've got to be quite personal with your employees. What do you think of that sort of dividing line in terms of how far you get into working out what your employees are up to?
Well, I mean, yesterday we talked about how do you really, in the remote working environment, how do you really get to know people? And when we're in this sort of linear Zoom kind of world where you can't really see see what people are doing all day, you don't really get a feel for abnormal versus normal behavior for one person. But I think, ethically and morally, when you're looking at monitoring, nobody wants to be watched. I mean, the fact, though, that, here in London, we're videoed on CCTV, 1,150 some odd times a day. But so some of it to that point is, look, here's what we are doing and here is why, so that people understand. And there's no cloak and dagger kind of around it, and which you can't do in Germany. But also, and I'm in a small company right now. My next position, which I start next week, is much larger. So scaling some of the things that I've been able to do for a smaller company, it's going to be a challenge for me. But I think for in that perspective, it's going to be more about training our managers to look at their team. And it's like what we were talking about, Hans Peter, yesterday with all the technical controls. Somebody has to, on our team and our FSEC team, has to analyze those, because it can only give us so much data, because it could be totally, we were saying, it could be totally raising hairs on the back of your neck that somebody logs in at 3:00 in the morning that's on our finance team. But if you know that the family just had a baby, then all of a sudden that doesn't become such an odd behavior. But if you know that person is leaving, then that changes the story. So it really is imperative that we work into our organization, that management teams need to, you need to know your people all the way down to, even when I was doing my last position with Scoutby, I wanted to cyber train the janitorial staff, because I wanted them to understand what we were looking for, and reporting is a big deal for me. So I feel like, reporting reduces risk, because I even want to know the near misses. So let's say that I'm training the janitorial staff, and they have an open line of communication with me, and they can come and say, hey, I found all these papers last night in the trash can that should have been.
Interesting one. Thanks for that. I wanted to go to Neil and ask about that. Before that, Neil, you've also got a teissTalk mug. I noticed you're the proud owner of a teissTalk mug. See, Neil's got the old shape one, which I think is better, because you go like that and it goes teissTalk that way. With this one, you have to to show the full brand. You have to kind of swivel in. Anyway, but that does bring me to the point that we have teissTalk mugs to give away. We can give away a teissTalk mug to one of our lucky attendees. So I'll give it away to whoever puts the best comment or quote in the chat. Whoever gets the best comment or quote in the chat, I will give a free teissTalk mug to, and you can join the Neil and Jeff club, the mug club. Not that we're mugs, Neil, that's not what I'm getting to, but you're at a large organization, you're at Canon, so Robin's point's interesting. In her organization, a bit smaller, a bit easier to keep an eye on. You're in a bigger organization. Have you got advice then you give Robin in terms of how that employee relationship knowledge can work in a bigger place?
Well, it really goes back to awareness is the key. And that is really one of the vital pieces. It also goes to historically we used to incentivize people to be accidentally malicious, and what I mean by that was there used to be the culture of, if you're the person that picks up a problem, you run the problem, and then you talk to other departments, and consequently you would train a whole load of staff that, in order to be helpful and cooperative, were then sometimes getting involved in areas that they really shouldn't have got involved with, but they were holding the problem and managing the problem. And these were really good staff that were trying to fix the problem for customers or other employees. And that's where you've then got to get back to make sure that the awareness about borderline, and Hans Peter made a comment on that earlier in terms of stopping the secretary having access to the financial data. So one of the areas that you can do this is do that differentiation to make sure that a role only has the access that they need. And then even if the customer, even if there is an accidental or even a deliberate attempt, it is less likely to succeed because someone doesn't have those keys to the kingdom. So that's one area which I think is probably an important part to really pick up on, that awareness in terms of, and also with that, having that openness. And again, this is where Robin kicked in terms of having people feeling comfortable to be able to say, this doesn't feel right. Is it right? And then have a look at it. And if it's a false positive, it's a false positive. And I would rather have 1,000 false positives than 4 incidents that cost serious amounts. So awareness is an important piece. I think also, I mean, this on the broader piece in terms of it's something that's being recognised by the regulators a lot more now. Both the EU, the UK, California are all bringing in regulations that say that home devices can't have a default password anymore. It will take a while for those to roll through, but that will take some of the sting out, because it will be more difficult to try a default to on an individual device be able to sort of talk people into, oh, hang on, why is someone trying to talk me to my router to understand my router password? And people tend to get more sensitive when they're being asked for what's protecting them and what's protecting others.
Right. It's interesting. Thanks for that, Neil. JJ's commented in the chat, there's great power in using UBEA, User Entity Behavior Analytics, understanding what is normal and then identifying abnormal, using monitoring that accounts for what groups the users are assigned to. This can give valuable insight into the IAM and risk teams. Interesting. Thanks for that, JJ. Hans Peter, I just want to come to you now, because it's interesting. What Neil's mentioned there is this idea of sectioning off or siloing off access to data, so that one employee, as you said before, lower level employees shouldn't get access to other types of information. From a sort of proactive point of view, assuming that there are going to be malicious insiders, are there other things you can do apart from that to stop the threat getting any worse, assuming it's already happening?
I mean, it's always. I think I like some of the discussion before. I think awareness is a lot of things. So train people, keep them in a very nice work environment as well. Make it easy to use so they can't make much errors on that. And to Neil's point, I tell you. I mean, this was work you have to do in an organization anyway. You have to profile your people. And profiling means also, so what kind of data, what kind of application, what kind of access those people need. And I mean, if you look a little bit at the European law, GDPR, then you have to do it anyway. Because you have to qualify your data, you have to structure your data in the right way, and this makes it much more easier then to control, to have access control based on profiles, and the best way again is to prevent. And the other point was, I think you can use artificial intelligence and machine learning for those kind of things as well. So and that's why. That's one of the reasons why I'm with BlackBerry, honestly speaking, because I think it was the first company to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning to security. And it never will replace humans, but it can support humans, because I think Robin mentioned the volume of data, the mass of data. I mean, you talk about real big data on that. Artificial intelligence and other technology can support you in make the right decisions.
Thanks, Hans Peter. Appreciate that. Paul's commented in the chat, slightly off topic. Never mind, but we like off topic. Training janitorial staff is a good shout. Salisbury NHS Trust had trained their porters on communications, which aided the trust greatly when they had some high-profile patients, which I think might be to do with the appalling Salisbury poisoning case when that happened. The hospital porters were able to explain to patients why procedures were taking longer and therefore managed expectations, which is interesting. And Aman Sood comments, disgruntled staff are often an overlooked insider threat. And I wanted to ask you about this, Robin, because we've got this idea that there's either completely innocent or completely malicious insiders. And there is, I wonder, there's this grey zone in the middle of people who, they're not tricked into doing it, they're not accidental, but they're not really deliberate. They just don't care. They really don't care what happens. And I wonder how you sort of get to that group of people.
Well, I was shopping one day a couple of years ago. I was at a high-end store and buying a present, and they couldn't check me out. And so one of the other retail team people gave her ID in order to get onto the cash wrap and to be able to complete the transaction. I wasn't in that much of a hurry, and I just sat them back and I said, don't do this. I said, if this till ends up off at the end of the day with a count, you're going to be blamed because you are the only one checking, using your identification all day. So, that's, and there's so many ways where people just don't really understand. I've heard cases, we try to beat it into people about access, about roles and access control and things like that. But, when people just want to get their job done and it's just easier, just use my credentials. It doesn't matter. Right. Well, it does. But we were talking yesterday about mobile devices, and people bringing their own things, and lots of contractors are used, in the UK to hire people, and they use their own computers or use their own mobile phones, and it's mobile phones are getting stolen here every day. So how do you wipe that phone? How do you know that they're not, how do you know that they've put a lock on it, or they have a way to wipe it themselves? So there's just the less control that we have as an organization on the things that we touch, that our employees touch, then the more opportunity there is for non-malicious insider threat.
Yeah. That's interesting. Sorry, there was a comment from Neil King in the chat. And Neil, because your profile picture in the chat doesn't have your beard, I thought it was a two Neil. I got very confused. But anyway, I want to come to Hans Peter on that. Hans Peter, Robin's point is interesting from a BlackBerry perspective, and what you talked about earlier with the software that BlackBerry provides that can sit on any device. Now that's good, but I do wonder if a company's using different apps, maybe apps for email, apps for data access, other apps for their other processes. Can that all sit inside that BlackBerry secure container, or does BlackBerry secure container just give you the apps that you then have to use BlackBerry's own ones?
No, it basically allows you to use your phone as your private phone. It just divides the phone in two pieces, where all our business applications are in the BlackBerry container, and it allows no communication between the container apps, so the BlackBerry apps, and the private apps. And this
But you do have to use. Sorry to interrupt. You do have to use BlackBerry apps inside the BlackBerry container. No.
You can write applications for it. It's container technology. I mean, that's a common standard. So you have to use. You have to apply the rules and regulations for a container. But you can put basically any application as a company, whatever company or organization you are. You put the app basically in the container. It makes just sure that there is a secure communication, encrypted, and all this kind of stuff. What you need to be secure, but it doesn't allow you kind of to paste and copy between your private and your business apps. And this gives you a high degree of security. I mean, and especially if you think about this tools like that. So in a recent study, I mean, 70% of the young employees ignore any IT security policies.
Well, this is
pretty okay. When it comes to developer, to engineers, because they want to do everything. It's even worse. So you have to put kind of technology in this kind of environment. Otherwise, we have to educate our people differently.
Well, it's interesting. One of the comments earlier on was talking about the end user licensing agreement, I think, or the agreement that the employee signs when they sign up. And I did look at that and was a little skeptical, because I'm not sure whether anybody read it or at least obeys it. But Neil, I wanted to come to you on this. I mean, some of the issues we're talking about understanding your workforce and getting these messages out and spotting these kind of user behavior things. For me, that goes into the HR department. Sometimes, they're the people who ideally would really understand the staff, can spot these sort of things. They know who's handed their notice in, or who looks like they might. To what extent do you think information security people like yourself can cross over into that space? Is there much flow back and forth, either in Canon or just in the experience you've had in other places?
So I think it's wrong to put HR at the center of that. Yes, they may well know who have already put their notice in and who may have some of the areas, but that's only if the employee or the manager has come to them. So a lot of the educational awareness really does sit in amongst the team and making sure that the team has that sort of feel in terms of, if you've got a friend that's not feeling well or whatever, being able to pick up on those signs is really an important bit. Where if you're lucky to be in a company where you have that relationship with the rest of your team, where you can talk through issues and whatever, that's a very big part of the process. And that's that back to the awareness piece. It is a holistic piece. And Peter alluded again to it, and I think Robin did as well earlier on, in terms of companies that people enjoy working for tend to suffer from this less than companies that try to strip everyone every last cent out of their employee. Yeah. Because part of it is that two-way respect process. So in terms of treating people as people is an important part of the awareness process of this, because people think, actually, you know what, my home and my office are one and the same thing.
Yeah.
I've got friends in the office, I've got friends at home, and actually I can talk. And if there's an issue or something that can be escalated and elevated, it's easier to do that when you're comfortable to do it.
Yeah.
When you also look at people that a child has an illness, or they have surgery planned or something like that, that goes back to training management on knowing your people. Because if you've got somebody with their finger on the red button, and they've just been given a devastating news, then it is the people around them and understanding workflows. And your InfoSec team, you should say, okay, we understand, we care for you. Part of that is we're going to take these responsibilities away from you right now because you're not thinking clearly, and that's normal. And do it in a way that is respectful, but yet understanding that we as humans will tend to err more when we are distracted and our minds are not in the right place.
Yeah, interesting.
I think, Robin, it starts already with the hiring process. I think to do kind of background checking, and you can check the social media about the person and so on. So I think HR can kind of contribute a lot to this prevention of the problem, right? So that's, for example, we try. I mean, we all try to hire the best people in the world, for sure. So, but we're all competing about the same resources. But I think a background check is something really good, for example, and a lot of interviews just to find out what kind of communication behavior people, how people behave with different people, and so on. I think just in the hiring process, you can do a lot in order to start this process.
Yeah, it's interesting. And this all taps into the interesting trend throughout the whole of this, which is it's not about people, not about technology, it's about the insider threat is so about people that you can talk about the technology side of it, but you've always got to have that people side in mind. And so I want to thank all of our panelists for coming to the end of the discussion now. Sadly, it's been a good one. I'm going to award the mug to Paul Barnes for his off-topic point about Salisbury NHS Trust. I like that one. Well done to you, Paul. Our Tice Goblin will be in touch to arrange delivery of your probably new style Tice mug, which you have to drink like this so that people can see the Tice logo. I want to thank all of our panelists. It's been a really good chat. Thanks to all of you. Hans-Peter Bauer, Senior Vice President EMEA for Cybersecurity at BlackBerry. Neil King, European Business InfoSec Specialist at Canon Europe. And Robin Lennon-Bilenga, at the moment, Human Factors and Performance Lead Scout B. Robin, we look forward to hearing about your new role, so we'll find out soon. We wish you the best of luck in it.
You.
Also want to thank our Tice Goblin and also Tice Hunter, who beaver away behind the scenes to make sure things run smoothly, and also you, our Tice Talk viewers. We are going to be back next week with my co-host Jenny on Tuesday at 4, talking about avoiding InfoSec blind spots and embracing diversity of thought. She's got a really good panel for that. So do tune in at 4 o'clock next week for her. But in the meanwhile, have a great rest of the day and a great weekend. Thanks again to our guests, Neil, Hans-Peter and Robin. And we'll see you again for another Tice Talk.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.